The night I walked into that dinner, I already knew what they thought of me. They didn't have to say it. They never really did. It was in the way their eyes swept over my clothes, pausing just long enough to register that I wasn't wearing the right labels. It was in the way they asked shallow questions about my life only so they could pivot back to talking about their own successes. It was in the silence that fell every time I spoke, like my words weren't worth their time. I've always been the broke one in the family, the dreamer, the girl who never quite measured up. My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. By all accounts, I should have been like them, clean-cut, polished, climbing the corporate ladder or married into wealth. But I chose a different path, a harder one. And because of that, they never let me forget it. It started years ago after college. While my cousins landed jobs at investment banks and law firms, I struggled through failed startups and contract work that barely paid rent. I remember the pity in their voices during family gatherings. Emily's still figuring things out, they'd say, like I was some lost child wandering through life without a compass. Even my parents, though they loved me, carried that heaviness in their eyes, the kind of look that said they wanted to believe in me but weren't sure they should. I told myself their opinions didn't matter, that I was stronger than their whispers. But anyone who's ever been called a failure by the people who should believe in them knows the truth. It cuts deeper than you can ever show. It lingers. It festers. It makes you question your own worth, even when you know you're building something real. By the time this dinner came around, I had built more than they could imagine. Years of sleepless nights coding in my cramped apartment, years of sacrifice of turning down instant gratification for the sake of a bigger dream had finally paid off. But I hadn't told them. Not yet. To them, I was still Emily, the girl with too many projects, the one who borrowed money for rent, once the one who never grew up. That evening, as I dressed, I chose simplicity. A plain black dress, hair tied back, no makeup beyond a touch of lip balm. I didn't want to impress them with clothes or glitter. I wanted to face them as myself, stripped down raw. Around my wrist, though, I clasped one thing: my watch. A Philippe Dufour Grande Sonnerie. A piece so rare that collectors spent decades hunting for it. Most of them would never touch one in their lifetime. For me, it wasn't just a symbol of wealth. It was a symbol of everything I had survived to get here. The watch had a story, one I never shared. Years earlier, when I was still clawing through debt, I found an old letter of my father's tucked into a book. He had once dreamed of owning a watch like this, a symbol of craftsmanship and patience, but life had never allowed it. Reading those words, I promised myself that one day I'd carry that dream for him. Not because I needed the world's validation, but because I needed a reminder that we don't stay small forever. That sometimes the broken girl at the family table becomes something more. When I arrived at the restaurant, the chatter of my family wrapped around me like a storm I'd walked into unprepared. The long table was already crowded, my father at the head, my mother beside him, my brothers, their wives, my cousins, and their partners. Plates of food gleamed under golden lights, wine glasses half full, laughter echoing too loudly. I slid into my seat quietly, hoping for just a moment of peace. But peace, I should have known, was never allowed for me in this family. "Oh, Emily's here," my cousin, Rachel, announced, her voice dripping with that fake warmth she reserved for people she pitied. "We weren't sure if you could make it. Busy with— what is it you do again?" A ripple of laughter went around the table. My stomach tightened. I forced a smile. "I've been working on a project." Rachel smirked. "Still with your little coding thing?" "That's cute. You know, Mark just got promoted to senior VP. Full benefits, stock options, corner office. Isn't that wonderful?" She leaned against her husband, her diamond earrings catching the light. I nodded politely, swallowing the bitterness. "That's great for him." My brother James joined in, grinning. "Emily's probably still eating ramen noodles and wearing thrift shop shoes." More laughter. I kept my eyes on my plate, my fingers tightening around the fork. It never stopped. The digs came one after another, about how I never seemed to settle down, about how I was always trying something new, about how I wasn't getting any younger, and maybe I should just marry someone stable before it was too late. Every word was a blade sliding between old scars I thought had healed. Through it all, I stayed silent. I let them laugh. I let them dismiss me. Because I knew something they didn't. And sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon of all. Dinner stretched on the table loud with wine and stories of promotions, vacations, houses bought and sold. My father, though, sat quieter than usual, sipping his drink, his eyes occasionally drifting down the table toward me. He didn't join in the laughter, but he didn't stop it either. That silence hurt more than the words. It wasn't until dessert arrived that the moment came. My brother leaned over, smirking. "So, Emily, how much do you even make with your project? Enough to cover dinner? Or should we spot you again?" The table erupted in laughter, and in that moment something inside me broke free. I lifted my glass calmly, taking a slow sip of water, then set it down with deliberate care. I shifted my sleeve back just slightly, revealing the watch on my wrist. The golden light of the restaurant caught its polished surface, and for the first time all night, the table fell silent. My father's eyes locked on it instantly. His breath caught. He leaned forward, staring, his voice breaking the silence. "Emily, where did you get that?" The table froze. My cousins craned their necks. Rachel's laughter died in her throat. James frowned, his smirk faltering. I met my father's eyes, steady, unblinking. I earned it. And in that silence, everything shifted. The silence that followed my words was heavier than any insult they had ever thrown at me. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes when people are simply at a loss for words. It was the kind that reveals the naked truth that everything they thought they knew about me had just shifted under their feet. My father leaned closer, his hands trembling as though afraid the watch might vanish if he blinked too long. "Emily," he whispered almost reverently, that's not just any watch. That's a Philippe Dufour." His voice cracked on the name as if saying it out loud carried weight he couldn't quite handle. The rest of the table looked bewildered. Rachel's husband, Mark, squinted at my wrist, unimpressed. "It's just a watch," he muttered. "What's the big deal?" But my father shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "No, not just a watch. This is one of the rarest in the world. Handmade. Only a few exist. Collectors spend their entire lives searching for one." "Emily, how?" His voice trailed off. And suddenly I was no longer the broke one. I was a mystery they didn't know how to solve. Rachel leaned in, her smile brittle. "Emily, darling, surely it's fake. You can get replicas of anything these days. Tell us you didn't waste your money on a knockoff." I looked at her calmly. "It's not fake." Her smile faltered. She searched my face for some hint of a lie, but I gave her none. James snorted, trying to bring the laughter back. "So what? Maybe you borrowed it or it's on loan. Emily doesn't even own a car half the time." But my father silenced him with a sharp look. That more than anything stunned me. My father had rarely defended me in these moments. For years he had let their words slice into me, while he sat quietly caught between wanting peace and unwillingness to challenge the family hierarchy. But now, for the first time, he looked at me like I was someone he didn't quite recognize, and maybe for once someone he finally respected. "Where did you get it?" he asked again. His tone wasn't accusatory, but searching, desperate almost. I felt every eye at the table burning into me. Part of me wanted to stay silent to let the weight of the unknown do the talking. But another part, the wounded daughter who had swallowed their disdain for years, wanted them to know. Wanted them to understand that I hadn't just survived, I had thrived. "I built something," I said, finally, my voice low but steady. "Something real, something mine. While you all laughed, while you dismissed me, while you said I'd never make it, I was working, building. And now? Now I can afford things even you can't imagine." The words hung there, sharp as glass. Rachel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of jealousy flashing across her face. "So what, you got lucky? Some investor threw money at you, a boyfriend?" Her insinuation stung, but I met her gaze without flinching. "No. No man, no investor, no lucky break. Just me, my work, my risk, my sleepless nights, my sacrifices." James muttered something under his breath about scams, but even he sounded uncertain. The confidence they had always used to diminish me was crumbling. They didn't know how to reconcile the image they had of me, the broke, fumbling little sister, with the reality sitting right in front of them. My father leaned back slowly, his eyes glistening. And for the first time in my life, I saw something in his face I had never seen before when he looked at me. Pride. It was subtle, almost hidden, but it was there. Memories rushed through me, nights of crying in my tiny apartment after a failed launch, mornings of drinking cheap coffee while my landlord knocked at the door, afternoons of overhearing my relatives joke that I'd probably end up moving back in with my parents. Through it all, I had dreamed of a moment like this, not to flaunt wealth, but to prove I wasn't the failure they believed I was. But the truth was more complicated, because even as I watched their smugness falter, even as I saw their envy and confusion twist into uneasy silence, I didn't feel triumphant. Not fully. There was still a hollow ache in my chest, a part of me that longed for their acceptance, their love, not their shock. I wanted my father to be proud, not because of the watch on my wrist, but because of who I was, who I had become. And that was the wound beneath all the laughter and insults, the desperate child in me who had wanted to be seen, to be valued, to be enough. Emily, my mother said suddenly, her voice gentle, cautious. Why didn't you ever tell us? I looked at her and I almost laughed. Why didn't I tell them? Because every time I tried, they rolled their eyes. Because every time I spoke, they dismissed it as childish dreaming. Because if I had told them, they wouldn't have believed me anyway. Because you never listened, I whispered. The table fell silent again. No one laughed this time. No one sneered. They just sat there staring at me like they were seeing me for the first time. My father cleared his throat, breaking the stillness. Emily, I never knew. His voice wavered with regret. I should have asked, I should have listened. Those words pierced deeper than any insult ever had. I wanted to believe him, wanted to let that child in me finally rest. But I couldn't. Not yet. The years of neglect, the years of being the family's punchline didn't just vanish in a single night. I glanced down at the watch, its quiet ticking, a steady reminder of everything I had endured to get here. It wasn't just a timepiece. It was my story, engraved in metal and silence proof that I had carved out my place in the world despite them. And as I looked back up at the table of faces that had spent years underestimating me, I realized this was only the beginning. Because family wounds don't heal with a single revelation. Sometimes they only open deeper before they close. The silence didn't last. It never does in my family. Silence is a vacuum, and they hate vacuums. They need noise control, chatter, anything to fill the air with their version of the story. Rachel was the first to break. She leaned back in her chair, swirling the wine in her glass, her smile thin and sharp. Well, congratulations, Emily. It must feel nice to finally have something to brag about. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes cut like glass. I shook my head slightly. It's not about bragging. Isn't it? She pressed. I mean, you sit here with that thing on your wrist, letting us all gawk at it like we're supposed to be impressed. It feels a little performative. The others murmured in agreement. My cousin Daniel muttered something about finally buying respect. My brother James scoffed. So what, Emily? You've got one fancy watch, and suddenly we're supposed to forget all those years you were broke asking for help. You think this makes you better than us? His words struck like an arrow because I could still remember the night I called him, voice shaking, asking for a loan to cover rent. He'd sent the money, yes, but not without reminding me of it every Thanksgiving since. I don't think I'm better than you, I said quietly. But I know I'm not less either. Not anymore. James slammed his fork down, the clatter echoing through the restaurant. You've always been less, Emily, less responsible, less realistic, less everything. And now you think one stroke of luck erases all that? Luck. I repeated, my voice trembling, though not from weakness. Do you think it was luck staying up night after night writing code until my hands cramped? Do you think it was luck losing friends, relationships, years of my life because I believed in something no one else did? Do you think it was luck getting laughed out of meetings, rejected by investors, told over and over again that I'd never make it, and still refusing to quit? The table went quiet again. My chest rose and fell with each ragged breath, but I didn't look away. I wanted them to see me. All of me. Rachel laughed nervously, trying to break the tension. Well, aren't we dramatic tonight? She looked around the table, seeking allies, but no one responded. Even Mark, her husband, avoided her gaze. I looked at my father then. He was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between shame and sorrow, pride and regret. His eyes glistened in the dim light. Emily, he said softly. Why didn't you tell me what you were going through all those years? I thought you were drifting. I thought you didn't care. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake him. You thought I didn't care? I had cared so much it almost destroyed me. I had cared enough to starve for my dream, to burn myself out, to live on nothing but determination when everyone told me to give up. Because you never asked, I whispered. His face crumpled. My mother reached for his hand, her lips pressed tight, but even she didn't try to defend herself. James wasn't done, though. He leaned across the table, his voice sharp. You think you're some hero now? You wouldn't even be here if we hadn't supported you all those years. Dad bailed you out more than once. We all covered for you, and this is how you repay us, with arrogance. Arrogance, I repeated, feeling my anger finally break its dam. You call it arrogance because for once I refuse to sit here and let you belittle me. You call it arrogance because I've finally proved you wrong. But this isn't arrogance, James. It's survival. I spent years swallowing your insults, letting you laugh at me, letting you define me. And I'm done. My voice shook, but I didn't care. Let them see my rage. Let them see the fire they had helped ignite. Rachel rolled her eyes. So you're still bitter. That explains everything. I turned to her, my patience gone. Bitter. Do you know what it's like to walk into every family dinner, already knowing the jokes that will be made at your expense? To feel your worth shrink every time you open your mouth because no one actually listens, to be invisible until the moment you're needed as a punchline? You don't know bitterness, Rachel. You don't know what it's like to carry those scars and still keep building, still keep fighting, still keep believing in yourself when no one else does. Her smile faltered. The color drained from her face. For once she had no clever retort. I felt tears burning at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Instead, I lifted my wrist again, letting the light catch the watch's polished surface. This isn't about money. This isn't about status. This is about proof. Proof that I wasn't who you said I was. Proof that I made it. Proof that I survived. My father's hand trembled as he reached for his glass. His voice was thick when he spoke. Emily, I'm sorry. The words hit me like a wave I didn't see coming. I had dreamed of hearing them for years, but now that they were here, they didn't heal the wounds. They only opened them wider, exposing how deep the cuts had gone. I wanted you to be proud of me, I admitted, my voice cracking. Not because of a watch, not because of money, just because I tried, because I never stopped trying. But all I ever got was silence. The table was deathly still. My cousins shifted uncomfortably. My mother's eyes shone with tears. Even James looked shaken, his anger cooling in the weight of my words. I sat back slowly, my heart pounding, my breath unsteady. I had said what needed to be said. I had laid bare the years of pain, the scars they couldn't see, the truth they had ignored. And whether they accepted it or not, I no longer cared. Because for the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. For a long moment, the only sound in the restaurant was the quiet clinking of cutlery from other tables, far removed from the storm swirling at ours. My chest felt hollow, like all the years of silence had finally poured out of me and left nothing behind but exhaustion. I thought maybe that would be the end of it, that the room would simply collapse into uneasy quiet, and I would leave them all with the truth still hanging between us. But then my father cleared his throat, his hands trembling around his glass. There's something you don't know, he said, his voice raw. The table stilled again. All eyes turned to him. My mother's hand darted to his arm, a warning in her touch, but he shook her off gently. His eyes watery with age and regret found mine. Emily, he said, do you know why I recognize that watch so quickly? I frowned, unsure. Because you know watches. You always read those magazines, dreamed about collecting. He shook his head. Because I almost owned it once. His voice cracked. Years ago, when you were just a child. I had a chance to buy one, a Philippe Dufour. It was everything I dreamed of. But your mother and I couldn't afford it. We had bills, tuition, mouths to feed. So I let it go. And I told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered so much I never stopped thinking about it. The words hit me like a punch I didn't expect. My mind flashed to the letter I had found years ago tucked into one of his old books. The one where he wrote about that same dream, about how life had taken it from him. That letter had become my anchor, the promise I carried, the reason I worked until my body broke. "I found your letter," I whispered, my throat tight. "That's why I bought it. I wanted to give you the dream you lost." His face crumpled, tears welled in his eyes, spilling over. My father, the man who had always seemed so steady, so untouchable, was weeping at the dinner table in front of everyone. The others shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to do with this sudden flood of honesty. Rachel glanced around, her lips pressed thin. James muttered something under his breath, but for once he didn't sound smug, he sounded lost. "I should have told you," my father said, his voice shaking. "I should have believed in you. Instead, I let the others laugh. I let them tear you down because I thought silence was safer, because I thought if I didn't rock the boat, you'd learn to be tougher. But all I did was fail you." His confession cracked something open in me. For years I had dreamed of hearing him admit he was proud of me, but what I got instead was this: a confession of failure, of regret, of guilt. And somehow it cut deeper than any insult. "You let them call me worthless," I said, my voice trembling with anger and pain. "You let them laugh at me like I wasn't your daughter. Do you know what that did to me? I carried those words for years, Dad. They burned into me. They made me believe I was nothing." "I know," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "And I'll regret it until the day I die." For the first time in my life, my father looked small. Not because he was weak, but because he was human. Flawed. Broken in ways I hadn't wanted to see. But before I could respond, Rachel slammed her glass down. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "We're sitting here listening to Emily play the victim again, and now Dad's crying about some watch. Are we really pretending that makes her better than the rest of us?" Her words snapped the moment in half. James chimed in, his voice harsh. "Exactly. She's still the same Emily, unreliable, unstable. One expensive trinket doesn't change that. You think money erases years of failure?" I turned to him slowly, fury bubbling inside me. "No, money doesn't erase it. But it proves that I survived it. That despite everything, all the nights you mocked me, all the times you dismissed me, I kept going. I built something from nothing, and that's more than you'll ever understand." Rachel sneered. "So now you're the hero, is that it? You want us to bow down because you bought a toy?" I leaned forward, my eyes burning into hers. "I don't want you to bow down. I just want you to admit you were wrong. That I was never less, that I was never broken, that I mattered." The words echoed across the table, louder than any shout. My mother pressed her lips together, tears spilling down her cheeks. My father nodded, unable to speak. But Rachel and James sat stone-faced, unwilling to give me that victory. And that was when I realized the truth. I had spent years chasing their validation, bleeding myself dry for the hope that one day they'd see me. But no matter what I did, no matter how much I built, there would always be people who chose not to see. People who needed me small so they could feel big. People who would never give me the acknowledgement I deserved. And that was their failure, not mine. I sat back slowly, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My wrists still glistened under the restaurant lights, but I no longer needed it to prove anything. The watch wasn't my revenge. It was my reminder that I had already won. The dinner ended not with reconciliation, but with fracture. My father wept quietly, my mother clung to him, Rachel stormed off in anger, and James muttered bitterly as he left. The cousins whispered, unsure where to stand. And me, I walked out into the night air, the cool breeze washing over me like absolution. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because they had finally accepted me, most of them never would, but because I had finally accepted myself. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped out of the restaurant, leaving the noise and broken laughter behind me. The city hummed around me, cars passing, neon signs, flickering, strangers hurrying home, but inside I felt strangely still. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of their opinions on my back. I walked slowly, letting my heels click against the pavement, the watch heavy, but comforting on my wrist. Every tick of its hands was like a heartbeat, steady, unshaken, a reminder of the girl who had once been laughed at and dismissed, who now stood unafraid in the quiet night. When I was younger, I thought victory would look like applause. That one day my family would finally clap for me, their eyes shining with pride, their words spilling over with recognition. But tonight had taught me something far more complicated. Sometimes the people you crave love from most are incapable of giving it. Sometimes their silence isn't about you at all. It's about them, their own fears, their own limitations, their own inability to see past their reflection. And yet I realized I had survived. I had endured every slight, every insult, every time they cut me down to size. I had lived through years of being invisible, carrying scars no one saw. And still I had built something lasting, not because they believed in me, but because I believed in myself when no one else would. That was my real revenge. Later that week, my father called me. His voice was rough, hesitant, like he was afraid I wouldn't pick up. "Emily," he said softly, "I don't know how to fix what I broke, but I want to try. I don't care about the watch or the money. I want to know you, the real you." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The child inside me ached to hear those words, to finally feel seen. But the woman I had become knew better than to hinge her worth on anyone else's recognition. "I'm here," I told him simply, "but I won't beg anymore." He was silent, then whispered, "Fair enough." And maybe that was the beginning of something new. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe our relationship would remain fractured, haunted by years of silence. But for the first time, I was at peace with either outcome, because his failure to see me did not erase who I was. Rachel and James avoided me after that night. They sent half-hearted messages to family group chats, pretending everything was normal, but I could hear the edge in their words. They would always see me as the girl who broke their illusions, who refused to stay small. And that was fine. I no longer needed them to see me. What mattered was that I saw myself. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I turned the watch over in my hands, tracing the delicate engravings, listening to its steady pulse. It wasn't about luxury. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about the promise I had made to myself years ago when I found that letter tucked into my father's book, that I would not stay broken. That I would build something that lasted, something that told the world and myself that I was here. And I had. The greatest twist wasn't the look on their faces when they saw the watch. It wasn't the silence that followed, or the pride in my father's eyes, or even the jealousy that burned in Rachel's. The real twist was that I no longer needed their approval at all. I had thought revenge would taste like triumph, but it tasted like freedom. Freedom from their laughter, freedom from their silence, freedom from the little box they had stuffed me into for years. And as I tell you this now, I want you to hear the truth. I learned the hardest way possible. You don't need to be seen by everyone. You don't need applause to matter. You don't need their love to be whole. Because sometimes the family that breaks you will never be the family that heals you. Sometimes you have to be your own healer. Sometimes you have to carry your own dream until it becomes real, even if the people closest to you never believe. So if you've ever been dismissed, laughed at, underestimated, or silenced, hear me when I say this. You are not the sum of their opinions. You are not the jokes they made at your expense. You are not invisible just because they refuse to look. You are more, you always were. I was the broke one, the failure, the family embarrassment. And yet here I am, not because they finally saw me, but because I never gave up on myself. If my story has resonated with you, if you've ever carried the weight of someone else's disbelief, I invite you to share your own. Like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment with your story, because your voice matters even if they never listened. And remember, the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. The best revenge is living so fully, so freely, that their silence no longer matters. That is the revenge I chose.